office here at the Centro, and also want to represent our director, Edwin Melendez. So to welcome you all, and thank you for being here. It's with great pleasure and pride that we open this beautiful visual art celebration of Loisaida, thanks to the artistry and generosity of this guest photographer and friend of the Centro and of the Puerto Rican community, Ms. Marlis Momber. Within the past 5 months since I've been here in New York City, every time I attend a Puerto Rican cultural event, there's this smile looking at me with her baby, no camera. She's always looking for outlook for and tracking down, documenting, and telling stories about the Puerto Ricans in New York City. So without further ado, muchas gracias and bienvenidos.
Buenas noches, bienvenidos a su casa, al centro, ¿ok? Espero que pasemos y disfrutemos la noche y ahora quiero decir unas cortas palabras y voy a invitar al compañero, my colega Mario Hugo Ramírez, who together we work in this project. This is a team effort, working together with Marlis, and it has been a pleasure. Marlis Momber visited the center many years ago. That is how I first met her. As a Puerto Rican from the island, her work opened my eyes and taught me about the Lower East Side communities and what the Lower East Side communities endured for many years. We knew that her work on documenting Puerto Ricans from Lower East Side should someday come to Central Archives. But in the archives, the time has to be right to make things happen. On February 18, 2008, Marlis was featured in a major article in the New York Times, and we have it in la mesa de exhibición. 3 days later, she showed up at Centro for an event that was organized by, with Dr. Georgina Falou and a group of Afro-Latinos about the significance of preserving our history and how Centro is committed to document the history and culture of Puerto Rican stateside. At that moment, I was delighted to find out that she wanted her work, her life work on Loisaida to be archived with us. We are proud and honored on her decision. We also talk about exhibiting her work in our gallery space. And after 2 months of working with her in selecting and preparing this exhibit, we learned that Marlis' scope of work in Loisaida is richer than expected. This exhibition is the first step to display some of her lesser-known work that is coming to the archives. But believe me, this is just a glimpse of a significant legacy to the present and future generations from Loisaida and beyond. As an archivist and so-called co-curator of this exhibit, I can say that it has been a great personal and professional learning experience to work with Frau Loisaida Marlis Momber.
Good evening. I really don't have much to say except I want to thank Pedro Juan and, of course, Frau Marlis for this wonderful process of her allowing me to be involved in this project. It was really wonderful. I mean, Marlis demonstrates a wonderful generosity of spirit, and it was really great to listen to a lot of her stories about the Lower East Side and over the past 3 years. I mean, I think I could have just spent hours sitting there and not, and of course looking at the photographs, but really getting the full story behind everything was really wonderful, and I don't know, just really sort of reminded me about what I do, and why I do it here. So with that said, I just want to also thank our wonderful staff and college assistants and everybody that helped the exhibition. They're mentioned in your program, but we always like to give them a shout out and say that we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. Also, I want to introduce now Marlis Diaz from N.Y.C. She'll be saying a few words about Marlis' work.
Hi, I want to thank El Centro for having me here. The reason for N.Y.C. actually is because of preservation of the Latino and the people of color's perspective on their own society and their own culture. N.Y.C began in 1974 by 3 Puerto Rican photographers. And I don't know if anyone knows about N.Y.C, but Charles Biasini, Phil Dante, and Roger Gabang started N.Y.C, and it was established in the Bronx for this very purpose. Since then, N.Y.C has opened its doors to encompass an array of cultures and races. So we help to promote photographers of color, which include Puerto Rican, African American, Native American, Pacific Islanders, and so forth, including the Latino community in general. N.Y.C's permanent collection holds over 600 images by people of color. And I'll just say a few names that are included in the collection. Frank Impaya, Juan Sanchez, which I'm sure some of you may know, Paulo Cambo, Frank X. Mendez, who is living in Puerto Rico right now, Victor Vasquez, Ricky Flores, who works for the Journal News, Hector Mendez Caratini, Angel Cheverez, Rita Rivera, Sophie Rivera, Nitza Luna. The reason why I'm naming these people is because when I was going to school, and many of you may feel that way at this point, and learning photography and learning about the history of photography, not one Latino name came out. So here it was in 1990s, and I still could not find someone that I can look up to that came from my own culture. As I was attending the college, I met up with a professor, wonderful man, Bruce Haverger over at City College, and he came out with this magazine, and he says, Marisol, come over here. And I said, okay, what does he want? Drops the magazine and say, look, this is Nueva Luz, and they're Puerto Rican like you. I said, okay, starting out in a funny manner, but you need to check them out, because to be honest, with you being Latina, Puerto Rican, so you're a woman, you're Puerto Rican, so you're Latina, and you're short, you may have some difficulty out there in the photography world, and I want you to connect and have allies. So I took the magazine, I called them up, and I went over to Kingsbridge Road and met up with Charles Biasini Rivera and Miriam Romes. At that time, she was the managing director, and now she is the executive director. She really wishes she could be here, but she's working on grants for the organization. And I just sat there, and I couldn't believe that this Puerto Rican man was telling me he was a photographer. I couldn't believe it. So I was completely excited, and 10 years later, I'm still there. And I'm still there and learning about all these people that document their cultures and document them in a way that's tastefully done, that's respectful. The artists here today, I have to tell you, my heart was just racing when I came in and saw the work, because you really, really touched me, and you touched so many here with how tastefully done and with so much love and passion. I mean, the passion that you have documenting the people of Loisaida for so many years, and you still continue to do that. I mean, it's completely amazing and beyond words. As someone who has issues calling herself New York Rican, I say I'm Puerto Rican, but I was born here in the Bronx. That's how I get out of it. We went through our own issues in the Bronx in the 70s with the fires and the drugs. So looking at this, I really remember, even though I was 5 years old, you know, the 2 fires we were involved with in our own building, the idea of our family being split up, either that or go to a homeless shelter, because that's what they gave you. And the homeless shelter basically had people sleeping on the floor, and you probably had some prostitutes there as well, just because of what was going on politically at that time. And, you know, basically getting together, moving into projects, because whether you were good or bad, it didn't matter. This is what was happening to you because of politics, because of greed. So looking at this work, it really touches me. I don't have photos of that time, but you've captured them. And it means a lot. You know, the social condition that exists and the progression of that. And also we wind up thinking about, what does progression mean? Does progress mean moving the people that were in that location that fought so hard for that environment? Does it mean to get rid of them and bring other people in? The same thing's happening to the South Bronx, actually. Right now, little by little, the artists have moved in, and the rents are going up. And we'll see what happens in terms of the development of that. I don't want to keep talking because I think it's about you. But just one last thing, about the collection. Elizabeth Ferrer, who is a curator and author and currently the director of Rotunda Gallery, went through our collection and has said that it is one of the largest collection in the nation in terms of Latino imagery. So we don't have it available, accessible right away because it's in storage, but we're in collaboration, talks to have collaborations with other galleries to show that work, to continue that going. So, you know, God willing, it will happen. And thank you, Centro, for having us here.
Well, this a wonderful story about Enfoco and the Latino photography community that I met a lot of them, and up front I would like to mention was Carlos Ortiz, who passed away last week. He's approximately my age. I went to see him in the Bronx. We were up for the same grant, actually, through El Centro here, years ago. Maria Dominguez arranged it. And then guess what? I didn't get in because I was a minority. So I jumped up and down. What are you talking about? You soy. Alemana, single mother, female photographer. You saw practically Puerto Rican. And, you know, and all that matters. And wait till the summertime. And who do you think I was? Who do you think I was anyway? Because you talked to me on the phone, and there I was. Anyway, nobody quite remembers that story, but it always really irked me a little bit, and now I'm here. So, but it's of course natural, and that love that Marisol was talking about, I got it from my wonderful, wonderful girlfriend. Here she is, Maria Dominguez, holding my baby up. And then there's Luz Rodriguez, and then there's tons of other communities here, and you know, I'm shaking, can you tell? And that love that I felt in those streets very, very early on, when the streets was, there's not the, you know, the quality photography, there's a little bit in the slideshow, but it's not really that represented here because of the wonderful editing that Mario and Pedro did. I remember the first time they came to my house, you know, Pedro had joked that he would bring a box and just take everything. I said, you can't do that because it has to be digitized, it has to be camerized, and it has to be dated. And they were totally overwhelmed. They didn't know what to do. They came back 4 times altogether, right? And finally, when we were here, they put all these photos on the floor, right? And then it was my job to get it up on the wall. And I couldn't have done it without the wonderful young ladies here that are really, really wonderful. They thought for themselves. They pointed out my many, many mistakes. And I'm old enough to admit them, of course, immediately. Because in photography, you cannot hide mistakes. You have to take care of them right away. And so it's in life. What I'm looking forward to is to, you know, this is only the beginning. It is a DNA, maybe, of my work. And there are filing cabinets in my house that are open and get really excited. Okay, here, darkroom is ready to print, let me print it. And then at one point, I just shove it closed again, because it's too overwhelming. This process was moving forward, going backwards constantly. And as you all know, the community, the Latino community in New York City and in my own family, and when I came here, actually, I felt like I was back in Berlin after the war, which was rubble. That was it, and we were not allowed to play in the ruins, but we did, because it was so interesting, and what did we look for was amazing, we looked for human remains, of course, like you can imagine. And we were not allowed to go there because there could have been a basement, plunging in, or actually ammunition going off, and we were not, but it was exciting. So I felt this thing exciting, and then there were these women with kerchiefs and aprons and hammers, and they took brick by brick, hammered off the mortar, and made these beautiful piles, like pyramids of bricks, and that's what Berlin was rebuilt from. We were too little to participate, and that made me angry that I couldn't go there. And so when I came here, I said, here's the possibility to save these houses, and then I walked in, and everybody spoke Spanish, and this is just like South America, speaking Spanish, and the music and the food, and I was right at home. I really was on so many levels right at home. But nobody believed me, una blanca, and it took me a little while to pick up Spanish, and hablo español como una vaca alemana. Pero 1 year I fled somebody's drug addiction, not mine, but the father of my son, and went to Puerto Rico. Instead, with Angie, can somebody point out Angie Hernández? Angie is this, I have to point this out. These 3 women are Angie. 1, 2, 3. This was La Plaza Cultural. Angie was flaquita como yo no sé qué. Todo the wonderful woman. And there's Sandra. Where's Sandra? Sandra, here's Sandra. There's Sandra is here. Look, this is Sandra. She's like 12 years old. Yeah. And this is Sandra, of course. And where is Joey? Is not here. David? Not here. Okay. David is here. Her son. That is his father. But anyway, that was also really funny, to get these relationships. Like my 3 girlfriends right next to behind Barrio. Those were I called them my 3 oldest Puerto Rican girlfriends. And they, of course, said they were sisters, right? And I believe they were sisters, like my sister Haida is my sister, And it took me years and years and years to figure out who is not married to whom and who is what child and blah, 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 blah. And to this day, sometimes I got some stuff straight, but some stuff I will probably never get straight, And the stories go on and on and on and on. And of course, my aim now is to, I have 3 books in mind. One will be a book of where, the best one, I think, is the one I like the best, is called the Loisaida Triangle. Remember Bermuda Triangle? Where did all the people go? Displacement, death, all kinds of real enormous things. But some people actually, so they ended up, which I always hated that word, they went on to maybe El Barrio. Okay, that's fine. Or maybe they went to east, further to Harlem or the South Bronx or Staten Island, like Pupa, Santiago, who made it out of here. Some of us really made it out of here, and made it someplace else, always coming back, okay? There's no doubt. This summer in the park, in Tompkins Square Park, it was just amazing. Pupa Santiago came back, not Pupa, of course, but Edgar, and Luis Guzman, of course, yeah. He was with us in the streets, okay? And it was really quite amazing. It was just, I can't begin to tell you, but that story is going to be where people go. I have these photos where you see somebody holding up an ancient photo towards, and then at that time in place. And I call it revisiting Loisaida. So I will find these people, and I found, while I was hanging the show here, total strangers came up and were really excited, and I said, can I take a picture? I took the picture. Okay, so one lives in Queens. But I'm looking forward to that, because he really remembered. He stood here, he stood next to the women with the testimonial is, their kids are telling about their drug addiction and how they got out through religion, Pentecostal. So he wanted his picture taken with them, and he was wearing a cross. I was just taking, now I want to go to Queens. Like, what I really want to do is go to Puerto Rico and find out and go to Florida, and go to Colorado, and go to Pennsylvania, and go to Delaware, and wherever they are, find them and do this revisiting story, and let them tell their story, Whereas I can talk on forever. I know all of these, every one of these photographs, for me, has the story of the day. I'll never forget the moment. I'll never forget where I was in that time, and that was the difficulty here, to move forward, you know, like, I mean, I gotta move forward, going backwards all the time, and I'm exhausted. I think I aged about, like, you know, I took that whole time on top of it. I didn't get younger, unfortunately, going back, right? I double aged, and it's really exhausting, very emotional, and now it needs to be preserved, which is here, and they will get, you know, boxes and boxes of it. It needs to be digitized. I need funding to digitize, because that's where it's going. I continue shooting this morning. Yesterday morning I went out. It was a gorgeous light. You know, I did some revisiting myself, and, like, you know, I can go up and down N.Y.C forever. I don't need to go anywhere else, but I'm looking forward to going there. And the other book is simply really people talking about themselves, like photographs with captions, with long captions about who is who. And the third one, I'm not going to talk about that right now. So, but yeah, anybody has some questions, so I can stop talking for a while. Come on, somebody. Yeah.
What was the best that you saw the people from Loisaida?
Wow. The best is kind of easily explained. There's a photograph in cabinet there by where Pedro is standing from El Coco, Jorge Brandon, El Coco que habla y canta, y recita. And I've heard about him, you know, when I was a fashion photographer on Fifth Avenue, and, like, I had traveled in South America and photographed fashion there, and, you know, and I heard about him, that he influenced all the poets, you know, from Miguel Algarín, Bimbo Rivas, Tato Laviera. Is Tato here? He was going to come. And many others. I mean, all the young ones also, you know, because he always had something to tell. And he taught me about, okay, so the first time I met him, he was actually making a living as a sign painter, right on N.Y.C, of course. And I knew it was him because El Coco que habla y canta, with his hat, you know. So I started shooting him, and he shot me some really mean glances. You know, what is La Blanca doing there with her camera in his face, right? And then he must have recognized me, because I know he heard about me, and I heard about him, and there's this glimmer in this photograph there. And then Maria Dominguez comes, takes that photograph, and makes beautiful illustrations out of it. So it was like that. Once people used to say that, you know, Puerto Ricans are not friendly, and I said, no. You have to make the first move, and then you get everything back that you put out there. Okay, so if you're friendly, they're friendly. There are exceptions to the rule, naturally. So you make a second step and a second step, and if nothing works, you run. You know, so, that didn't happen too often. But, you know, since I was always loaded with cameras, I was, as kind of my mother always said, put nobody in temptation. And you know, it was very tempting to beat me over the head and rob me of all my cameras. I mean, no digital cameras, no zoom lenses, no nothing. You had 5 lenses, 5 camera bodies, couple of extra lenses. I was packed. You know, there's one picture also, right? Did we bring that in? The photo where I'm packed like a mule, you know, with it's like just my shadow, and I look humongous. And so then came, so it was that, and then it moved, you know, like people say, oh, you're the photographer. They said hi to me. My son, who's now 30 years old, grew up here, and he couldn't stand walking down the street with me. Everybody said, hi, Marlis. I said, hi, how are you? He said, who is it? I said, I have no idea. Yeah, it was wonderful, you know, but I mean, it was like standing in front of all of you now, taking a picture. Then it's very easy for you all to remember my name, but will I remember all your names? No. But once I shoot you, meaning taking an image, I have I can then connect your name with the image or something like that, you know. I'm totally dyslexic, so it's difficult for me. It's not easy in the learning process. Yeah, and then came, you know, I felt so at home. It was ridiculous. Some people still looked at me, oh, como una blanca, but I didn't feel it. And so I always had to count that. I said, you know, some people will feel, some white people will feel concerned, or whatever you want to call it. You know, what's she doing with all this? You know, I mean, when I was a commercial photographer, I would show the stuff as multimedia slideshow like 4 projectors, a video camera in between, and show it. And they loved it. And I had musicians here, not the young bloods we have here now, but they, they were about my age. And we had the most incredible parties. And they had fun. They would flirt with the Puerto Rican girls and the black girls and the boys and whoever it was. When I went to the office, okay, quite frankly, and this is like shocks me because I left Germany for that reason, racism. And I went to the offices after they had a ball and really had a good time. They said, what are you doing with those pigs and niggers? I mean, I walked out. I lost jobs, I lost clients, I made them angry. And they would book, in commercial photography, we would book, like Grace Jones was a really good friend of mine, Jessica Lange was a really good friend of mine. I loved the two of them together because of their contrast. You had a really special lighting technique to get them even, you know. And then we would book them to go on trips, and they would be fitted to closing, they would be, they would get paid. But then 4 days went by, I didn't see one person of color in front of my camera. So I said, I'm not shooting anymore. I want these people, they look good in that clothes, and I want those photos in the Caribbean, you know, or in Florida, or wherever we were, in Mexico. So, yeah, I lost all my clients through that. You know, and then I said, tant pis, je m'en fous. That's French, okay, how do you say that? But it was a little bit like that. I'm not sorry. Had a great time as a fashion photographer. I applied a lot of, you know, quick shoot street stuff on the streets. Like, you know, there's Marky there, the one other one. I found, while I was working here, I suddenly picked up the phone, and he had called me a while ago, and I called him. He left here having full-blown AIDS, left to Florida, and I called him, and he's alive. He's coming up. He was almost going to come tonight. You know, he's going to come up. The next time we're going to have at least 2 events. Alberto promised me. One will be the showing of the 1978 film Viva Loisaida, which is an amazing document. I shake when I see it because it's so amazing. And there's another one called El Corazón de Loisaida, which is even older, a short film, black and white. You have it here in the archives. And there's a new one from 2003. Called Not For Sale, and it's by a young French woman, Jaël, who lived on 7th Street and did a wonderful, wonderful documentary. You know, it was really turning over. I mean, gentrification was pushing people out by the you know, whole families, whole buildings and stuff like that. And she did a great job. And then the second event, I'm not quite sure, but it will be, I think, maybe reviving an old slideshow. My oldest photo is over here. In 1975, I actually came down from, I just had been in Canada, in Panama, I mean, and saw all these incredible murals, you know, political murals, and I happened to drive to Loisaida and said, wow, what's happening here? This is exactly this incredible expression of what's wrong with the state of America, you know, the United States or New York or whatever, and the history of all these immigrants, and I loved it. I started photographing them, put a slideshow together. Somehow the community found out about it and used them for fundraisers, especially the churches and schools, and they used them for fundraisers. And I would send the father of my son with the slideshow while I was still doing fashion on Fifth Avenue. And then little by little I got really sucked into the Lower East Side through my lens, through all my lenses. Imagine, 7 lenses, like now you're the only one. So yeah, that was a long answer to a short question. But I still have, it has just started. It has just started, which is the amazing thing. Now, organisation est le clé du succès. And that organization is like impossible for me. So I need lots of help. The digital helps a little bit. At least it has a date on it, right? Then there's my friend John, who can always straighten my digital camera out for me again. Because he's a wonderful, incredible photographer, digital. I had to learn that, you know, it was really hard. And I always thought, I said, well, maybe I'll just be the little old lady who still knows how to shoot and develop and print black and white film. For this show, I went back into the darkroom and found it impossible because they didn't have my favorite paper anymore. They don't manufacture it anymore. They don't have my favorite nothing anymore. So I fooled around in my darkroom. First of all, it took me 2 days to you know, dig it out again from where it was. I have a great enlarger. I have a, you know, temperature-controlled sink. Everything should have been just floating out of there, and it wasn't, because I would have had to learn, and I will teach myself which of the available papers, which then you have to figure out, are they going to manufacture them next year? And they might not. So why spend all that time in the darkroom when I could spend it scanning, which is where it's going? you know. But I have my pride, and I want to be that little old lady who still can print black and white pictures. So who knows what comes of that? Yeah, one more question. Come on. Yeah.
I haven't looked at all your work right now, but I could see that in a lot of them, folks are conscious that you're there. Are you also a voyeur and take pictures without them knowing you're there, or
I
is that
did
part of your technique?
In the beginning, I used the telelens, wide, from across the street or like way there, and then I said, well, that sucks, that sucks. I want to and then I had this incredible wide-angle lens, and I just walked right up to people. And of course, the Nikons, the old Nikon, weigh a ton. First of all, they're metal, and the shutter sounds like a gun. Kaboom, kaboom! Each time I take a picture. So it was very hard to be clandestine, to be undercover, and especially when I did the drugs. We don't show the drugs here, which is kind of not really necessary. But I shot photos because the father of my son became a drug addict, and I wanted to find out why. So I was hiding in Bimbo was this living room. It was an empty lot across the street, a huge empty lot, and all the shooting was happening. A lot of the people shot up there, and I shot and shot and shot and shot and shot. And each time it was summertime, window was open. The scene was unbelievable. I shot and shot and shot, and exchanged film and went to telelens, to wide-angle lens, and then there was a police raid, and what the police did to the people was indescribable. That film will only be published after I'm traveling on. And then we fought that, we fought the police. We knew where the drugs were. Why didn't the police know? They knew. They said demand and supply. They rather kept the drugs down here in the slum, rather have it up in the Upper East Side, right? So when Cookie and I, is Howie here? Howie, he didn't make it, okay. Howie is that cute little boy there right underneath the dance picture. He's now, I don't know, how old is Howie? Anybody knows how old Howie is? Anyway, and Cookie and I would sit on the fire escape without cell phone, like our phone lines would almost break, would stretch them all the way down and out to the fire escape, and then call cops, call police, and said, there's this car, and described it with everything, and we just saw, they opened the trunk, and there's all these guns and drugs in there. And okay, calm down, who are you? I said, we didn't say our names at that time, and we hung up the phone. And then we watched them come, and what did they do? They bust the wrong car, and then there was nothing. And stuff like that, on and on and on and on. And the dedication of Cookie and Tina, and this is just one family, and then okay, the food, yeah. You all saw Adela's kitchen, right? If anybody hasn't been to Adela on 4th Street, 66 Avenue C or Loisaida Avenue between 4th and 5th Street, tonight we're partying there, okay, so you're all welcome to come. And please be in touch. There's a book going around from previous exhibits if you want to sign up. You can also get onto that second computer there and put your email in, or put your email someplace. If you want to come to the other events that we're having, be in touch with El Centro or be in touch with me. And and thank you all for coming. And take a good look around, okay? And be in touch.